Peace and love, family. Um, Peace and love, family. I'm Brother Frank, and this is Peace and Love, family. I'm Brother Frank, and this is U.S. Political Prisoners and You, brought to you on Black Power Media. I'm back on. I don't know what's wrong with that. But anyway, we got to proceed. Just want to say that this is U.S. Political Prisoners and You, brought to you by Black Power Media. And today we'll be talking about jazz. Today is the 8th day of Jazz Appreciation Month. And I'm with my brother, Baba Ashanti. Welcome, brother.
Thank you, Brother Frank, and thank you not only for having me on, but for the work that you do, man, in this struggle, and specifically for political prisoners and keeping that spirit of still being in this fight to the finish. Thank you.
Absolutely appreciate you, brother. I don't know why I'm getting that echo, but we still got to proceed with the show. So before I ask my question that I usually ask, I'm going to go into the history of jazz. Origins of jazz. Jazz emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, primarily within African American communities in New Orleans, Louisiana. It was influenced by various musical styles, including blues, ragtime, spiritual, and European harmony. The cultural melting pot of New Orleans allowed for the fusion of these diverse musical elements, leading to the development of a unique sound characterized by improvisation, syncopation, and rhythmic complexity. Early development. In the 1910s, jazz began to gain popularity with the first jazz recordings made by the original Dixieland Jazz Band in 1917. This period saw the rise of New Orleans jazz, which features collective improvisation and a front line of brass instruments such as trumpet and trombone, supported by rhythm section. Key figures like Louis Armstrong and Jelly Roll Morton played significant roles in shaping the genre during this time, with Armstrong becoming known for his virtuosic trumpet playing and improvisation skills. The Jazz Age and Swing Era. The 1920s, often referred to as the Jazz Age, marked a significant cultural shift as jazz became a defining feature of American music. It spread to major cities like Chicago and New York, influencing popular culture and the Harlem Renaissance. The swing era of the 1930s and 1940s saw the emergence of big bands and arranged dance music, with band leaders like Duke Ellington and Count Basie achieving widespread fame. Evolution in style. As jazz continued to evolve, new styles emerged, including bebop in the 1940s, which shifted the focus from danceable music to more complex and improvisational forms. This was followed by the development of cool jazz, hard bop, and free jazz, each introducing innovative approaches and expanding the boundaries of the genre. Cultural significance. Jazz has always been more than just a musical genre. It is a reflection of the cultural and social dynamics of its time. It has served as a form of expression for African Americans, addressing themes of struggle, resilience, and identity. Today, jazz continues to thrive globally, influencing various music styles and remaining a virtual body part of the cultural landscape. In summary, jazz is a rich and dynamic genre that has evolved over more than a century, rooted in African American culture and characterized by improvisational nature and diverse influences. Its history reflects broader social changes and continues to inspire musicians and audiences around the world. That's just give you an understanding and briefing of jazz. So I'm going to my first question. My first question is, what is the political historic relationship between jazz and the fight for freedom?
Right on. That's with that background you just gave. That's perfect. And I'm going to speak from you know, my experience of coming into a listening phase of jazz as a young teenager. My family comes out of a church. I'm a church family. That's a church family. So there's gospel and there's a cappella as well. But we moved one time. I was 8 years old, between 8 and 10. There was a family that we were very close to in the new area we lived was a jazz family. And so getting to know them and me getting close to the children of my age, I got to understand this jazz thing. My older brothers was now into jazz. We'd always been, you know, from gospel music to soul music and stuff, but now there's this jazz thing. And I found myself, you know, including that in the whole repertoire of other musical things that I was close to. Coming to understand the historical significance of jazz to the struggle, it was me reading things like from folks like Cornel West as an academic, or listening to Wynton Marsalis talk about jazz, and like you talked about New Orleans and that era too. That's where Wynton Marsalis is from. They put jazz not only in the musical framework, they talked about jazz as a way of being in the world. They talked about improvisation, and that word improvisation kept coming up over and over again for me. And I'm like, okay, this improv, what does it mean? And so what they were saying in the historical sense was, when you take a people from Africa and you put us into the bottom of these slave ships and you dump us onto the shores of Turtle Island, that is going to become this racist empire. You have now put a people that have to improv just to survive. Improv now becomes more than just the music, but is how do we wrestle with the horror of this experience that we've just been dumped into? How do we resist, and how do we change? You know, and so everything we did, everything we touched, we had to improvise. We had to make it work for us, even under the circumstances that these monsters are denying us ways to practice, you know, our ancestral practices, whether it's religion, education, defending ourselves, and all of that. And it became more understandable that, you know, that part of our struggle, that jazz part of our struggle, is a part of our resistance, you know. So here we are on the shores now, and then you go into when blues develops, you know, and you see that blues is an answer to the pain of this experience of being in this empire. But the blues helps us to keep in touch with that spirit in us that that always reaches for light. You know, it's like that, what they would say about Tupac, you know, that one thing about the flower that comes out of the cracks of the concrete in the sidewalk. We're going to find a way to serve that spirit. And the blues did that. And then when jazz came, jazz was continuing that. But I'm a really focus on and be brief. That free jazz style was, of course, that period that I started to become conscious of jazz. So all them figures, Coltrane, I gotta list them. The trumpet, Miles Davis, Rahsaan Roland Kirk, Pharoah Sanders, Leon Thomas, and all these other ones, they were responding again to the circumstances of our oppression in the late 50s, going into the 60s and the 70s. And it was again that their music was just doing things that was so unconventional. And it was challenging us to, like, we don't have to stay within the conventions of this empire, within the laws and the beliefs of this empire. So when you started hearing Coltrane with that saxophone, or Max Roach with that drum, or the voices of people like Ella Fitzgerald and Abby Lincoln and others, it was affirming over and over again that we can also live our lives different. We don't have to accept that. Because when we was in these spaces that they was performing, we found that it was free in our spirits. We found that we like to be together in these spaces, and this before the spaces was even becoming so uh, um, professionalized into the clubs and all the stuff like that. A lot of times it was still in the community, you know, but it was responding to the Vietnam War. It was responding to the racism in the country, was responding to the imperialism in Africa and other places. Everything that it was doing kept feeding our spirit to fight back. So that became like this jazz thing, man. And it was so much, even for us as organizers, you know, when we was listening to it on the radio. This is before the phones and, you know, and all the stuff we got now. But when you heard that music, man, it was doing something to you in the midst of the organizing that you're doing, in the midst of the fight back that you're doing. It was powerful. It was showed that this multi-dimensional way of fighting back was coming from so many different directions. The poets, the Sonia Sanchez's and the Gil Scott Herons and all the other ones. It was all that jazz experience.
Oh, that's beautiful, brother. I appreciate you taking my mind to those very important, powerful places.
Mm,
You, you mentioned Pharoah Sanders, and that creator has a master plan.
yes.
I remember my field marshal telling me that that was a revolutionary anthem.
Mm-hmm.
So I could only imagine what brothers and sisters was going through during those times.
Right.
Like you're under attack by COINTELPRO. You got the state being extremely vicious and bloodthirsty. And this brother comes with this song, the creator has a master plan. I think
Yeah.
that did something to the spirit as well as the morale, obviously. And it kept brothers going stronger and understanding that at the end there was a goal, and that goal was our freedom.
Right.
So my next question is, what are the lessons that can be learned from this relationship in 2026, particularly around the fight to free our political prisoners?
Okay. I think the lessons that we as a movement of African people, I think there's so much to learn from this this jazz like way of seeing being in the world. Jazz, the whole experience, and if we focus on the jam session, which was always very social in somebody's house or some space before it became vinylized on some record. It gave us a way to, in a sense, and Cornel West also speaks to this too, and Wynton Marsalis. It was a form of democracy. It was when you're in that space, you're coming in with who you are as an individual. You already understanding that you have differences, whether it's the music that the instrument you bringing in or the way you play your music. But when you coming into that jam session, you are also now learning to blend. You are learning that confrontation is a good thing. And Miles Davis even speaks to that. You know, it's like you may look at it as a mistake because you seem like you're you're at odds. But Miles will show you that no, that's music. This is music that we're doing here. Our forms of fighting back, organizing has to be the same way. We have to understand that we are different, but our differences can come together to make a music, and in this sense, to make liberation, to take them winning steps towards liberation together. But we understand that we're embracing everything. The other thing about jazz that got to be incorporated is that it allows for each one to solo, which basically says we all got gifts. We don't want to have our organization structured in such a tight hierarchical way that it just prevents people's gifts from coming forth. That's why the Vietnamese and other struggles would say women hold up half the sky, because even at that time, you know, that real male approach was like telling women, you got to stay in the background. You do the things that women traditionally do. And that's like, no, we gotta allow our Ella Fitzgeralds and others to come forth. And on the other thing, and again, just to be brief on the time thing, that the diversity that comes into this understanding of jazz means that our struggles have to accept our diverse ways of approaching liberation, from those who do the community organizing to those who go underground and fight in other ways, that it is still all part of this jam session. Or if we took the words of Amiri Baraka in terms of an orchestra, not orchestra, but an orchestra that allows for us to bring our gifts into this one single space towards liberation without nullifying who we are or the gifts that we bring. So when we can do that, I think we will progress further. I want us to look also, and then I'll stop. Look at how jazz helped us, or the music helped us back in the 70s. It came to our support when we called on them. If we was doing a fundraiser for political prisoners, there was always these so many jazz artists who would come forth, who later became like so recognized in their fields, but they always kept a dedication to their people's struggle. It definitely, when you talk about a Pharoah Sanders and the Leons and the Gary Barts, you know, Uhuru Sasa and all like them last poets, Gil, they kept a commitment to our people. So there's ways to still bring these different things together, and like, especially around the political prisoners, when we still need so much support, those artists can still play a part in helping to raise consciousness and bring people together so that we can continue to fight for the liberation of our political prisoners and the advancement of our struggle, so that we stay focused on liberation 100%. No bamboozlement, as Malcolm would say. We are going towards our liberation in this situation that we're in.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, brother. I want to take a moment to recognize this important book by Amiri Baraka. It's in my library. And if you don't have it, you need to go get it. Because as the brother started explaining jazz and getting into the theory of jazz, I think that that's important to understand the concept of improvisation. Because when we doing organized work, we come across different differences with comrades and even in the community. And we have to learn how to adapt. And adapting, we struggle to win somebody over to our ideas. My next question, what is the role of current jazz musicians in the fight to free U.S. held political prisoners?
I think there's a lot of jazz musicians, and I think there's a lot of revolutionary artists out there, and especially on local levels that are not on big label names, but are trying to be relevant to our struggles. I think we got to just find them the same way that when like going back to the 80s or maybe 90s, 80s, 90s with Malcolm X grassroots movement would do Black August. And they would put out that call to the hip hop folks, and they would come. They would come to support political prisoners. They would do the Black August concerts from here to Cuba to raise monies, you know, to support the work that we do around, you know, freeing our political prisoners, because a lot of it is legal, and some of it is fighting for their medical treatment, and then others is just on the social tip that we stay connected with them and make sure that their families are able to visit them, because a lot of times they're sent so far away that it's impossible for the families to get to see them. On all them levels, you know, it just shows that there's work to be done. It's multi-dimensional, and it got to come from all these different places, you know. So I mean, just like being in New York, you know, sometimes you see talent in so many places, but it's like we got to figure out how to call on folks, you know, to come into our spaces again, like they used to raise awareness, because the music, the art, the poetry, the dance, all of them still impacts people, you know. And it's like you never know which one is going to impact any individual to like touch that consciousness in ways like, I need to get involved, I need to join this organization, I need to support this work. So I think in that way, you know, we gotta find all these folks, and I'm sure that they're there, because sometimes you can just go on social media and you see it, but that might be one of the challenges, that you see it on social media, but they're not coming to the events. And it just might be a conversation. It just might be, can we meet face to face, which was also jazz too, that jam session, face to face. Come support us, support the work we do to free our political prisoners.
Absolutely, brother. I know when I reached out to Joy Brown and asked her to perform on behalf of us for the Free Kamau Siddiqui campaign, she was honored to do it. And she's a jazz musician with a beautiful voice, and she embodies what Nina Simone said. When Nina Simone said that musicians had the responsibility to reflect the time.
Yes.
So when she's performing for the fundraiser, she's being an example of what our jazz musicians need to be doing.
Right.
I think about the songs of John Coltrane when he made Alabama for the four sisters that were killed in that bombing in Alabama. And I was thinking about how that song was constructed and how it really makes you reflect deeply on what happened.
Right.
And it raises your consciousness about how do you relate to this tragedy. Are you bothered? And if you're bothered, what are you doing about it?
Right.
I just want to spend these last few minutes talking about particular songs that you have in mind that made you think about our situation. Like that's one song. And then the other song that I mentioned was The Creator Has a Master Plan. So in your library,
definitely the Creator Has a Master Plan. Pharoah Sanders and Leon Thomas. And I would see Leon Thomas when I worked at the Liberation Bookstore of Una Mozak way back, around 135th Street. Sometimes you would see Leon Thomas on the basketball court with others, but he had that type of voice that when he sang The Creator Has a Master Plan, you felt it. Another one was Eddie Harris and Les McCann. They did a tune called Compared to What? And Compared to What was another one where they are like, it was one of the first times we're on the radio. Usually you didn't hear nobody cussing, you know, and the word that they used was just like, God damn it. But it was like, you know, talking about the Vietnam War, about how these people here, these pigs treat us here. And he was saying, you know, compared to what was like, why are we accepting this bullshit?
Wow.
And it made you think, yes, we just accepting this, we're not questioning it. And so that was like one of them tunes that was that would stick with me. Another one was Gary Bart's Uhuru Sasa, you know, and Uhuru Sasa was the same thing, was we don't have to accept this. You know, we won't fight your filthy battles no more. Hell no. You know, because I got my own battles to fight. So them things was that you turned that station on, that's what you're hearing. And it's affirming you. Yeah, we need to be in this struggle. It's affirming you. Last Poets, it was the same thing. There was so much. Last Poets would talk about the Viet Cong and the little old man walking through the jungle, the Viet Cong. But the United States Empire could not defeat the Vietnamese people, could not defeat. As advanced as this empire is, with this enormous nuclear powers, the spirit of the Vietnamese people proved greater, to the point where they forced the United States out, a defeat of the #1 empire in the world. You know, so like the music plays a part, whether it's with words or whether it's not. You know, something about how that music works through you tells you that your desire to be free, to enjoy, to have a dignified life, yes, own it, embrace it, because it's all around you. It can be looked at in terms of God, it can, or spirituality, you know, but it's there, and the different ways that it comes through that we always got to recognize is through art.
That's incredible, brother.
Yeah.
There was this other album that I got from the library by Joe Henderson. It's called Power to the People. And it was made in the 60s. And this album, from the beginning to the end, it was just deep.
Right.
Every song was unique, and every song made me reflect on the time that it was made. I think it was made in 1959.
Right.
So I can only imagine what was happening for him to call it Power to the People.
Right.
But I felt empowered as I listened to it, because it let me know that this is his contribution to our struggle for liberation. He was not comfortable with the conditions of his people, and he was inspired by those who were taking a position. Because for him to call it Power to the People, he obviously was informed about that slogan and what it meant.
Right.
So it reflected his creativity, and that was his contribution.
Right.
So it's those examples that I think that musicians of today need to look back at. And that's why Jazz Appreciation Month is so important, because it makes you go back into the history and ask some serious questions about what the music is for, and who came and did what with it, and who benefited off those actions.
Right on. And just before we end, I want to definitely mention Bilal Sunni Ali, who also played with Gil Scott-Heron, and Bilal coming out of the Black Panther Party, Republic of New Africa, former political prisoner, BLA, everything, and you can still get, I think you can still get his music, but saxophone player, you know, who also at some point was arrested, political prisoner and everything. But that's that same thing about the music and the spirit, that's how it worked him.
Absolutely, brother. And I appreciate you mentioning his name. He's now an ancestor. So we definitely have to pour libation out for him. He actually was on the show. So now that episode is a classic.
Right.
So, brother, I appreciate your time. Thank you for working with me as I dealt with these technical difficulties. You carried the show. So thank you for educating me more on jazz and helping me appreciate jazz more. Any closing words, brother?
Free them all. Free them all.
Free them all. Free them all.
Right on.